My name is Dr. Colleen Sierra. I am joined by my friend, therapist, and fellow business owner, Tina Shrader. Today, we are talking about couples and communication and all of that goodness and juiciness. But before we dive in, I'm going to quickly read you Tina's bio so you can hear a little bit more about her. Tina Power. I said Shrader. You have Power now?
Well, it's my middle name.
Tina Power is a licensed marriage and family therapist, speaker, and founder of Empower Family Therapy, a thriving group practice serving the Chicagoland area. Through her coaching and consulting business, Tina Power Coaching and Consulting, she helps couples on the brink of divorce break free from the cycle of having the same fight over and over again. We're so glad you're here. By teaching essential communication tools, Tina empowers couples to rebuild connection and intimacy, creating a relationship their grandkids will admire. Oh, that's cute. Beyond her work with couples, Tina is passionate about supporting fellow therapists and building sustainable, fulfilling careers. She's also a sought-after speaker, bringing her expertise in conflict resolution, communication, and relationship dynamics to corporations and professional audiences. Whether in a therapy room, through coaching, or on a stage, Tina is dedicated to helping people communicate with clarity and confidence in all of their relationships. You're just the best.
It sounds like it. I'm like, who's this gal?
So, and yes, this is officially, there's a few things going on here. This is our first in-person podcast. It's also going to be our first Therapist After Dark podcast. So
That's like, I can't hold it anymore.
So that is in fact champagne. If drinking is a trigger for you, you may want to bypass this until at least we're done pouring champagne in coffee mugs. So while we do that, you know, I already warned you that this podcast is all about, thank you, letting therapists be humans too. So I have to ask, and I don't even know if I know this story, quite frankly, like how did you get into deciding that you wanted to be a therapist and then specialize in couples?
Oh, yeah. Well, I kind of always knew I wanted to be a therapist, which I feel like is a strange answer, but I was doing
Not at all.
Okay, good. I think it is to some degree like a calling, you know, it's
For
just
sure,
like,
a vocation.
Like, yeah. But I was doing some like middle school project and came across the UCLA family department where they had done this research on family therapy. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I want to do that. I didn't end up going to UCLA because turns out it's very far from Florida where I grew up.
Makes sense.
But that's kind of how, and I always just like took steps towards that path and nothing veered me in another direction. So yeah. And then I started working with mostly families and kids and like youth in crisis. But my training was all with couples, families, because I'm an MFT. So I had the training to do couples. And then once I became a parent, I realized I didn't
want to work with kids. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
I just wasn't as an objective party as I used to be, and I felt like they deserved. So I kind of just shifted to working with couples, and that's really, I feel like, where I found my stride more.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you have your own group.
Yes.
So quite a leap to go from being a therapist to a group practice owner.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was always part of, I mean, I was on my own in my practice for only a short time. And then, you know, COVID happened and there was quite a boom in need and desire. And it was, I just went with the momentum, I think, which is probably not a great business model, but.
But I feel like that's how it goes for a lot of us. Like an opportunity presents itself.
Absolutely.
We're entrepreneurs who take it by the horns.
Yeah. And I had created my practice out of a vision of wanting to create a space where, you know, niche therapists, family therapists, specialized therapists could do their craft instead of just being generalized. And I think that spoke to a lot of people and people, you know, specifically that wanted to have that space as well. So it grew out of that, I think. And then here we are.
And here we are. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to get juicy. You work with couples who are having communication and therefore conflict issues, which to some degree is common. But it can get out of hand. So
Yes.
can you start by walking us through some of the pain points in your own marriage that you started to notice and you're like, I think a lot of other people are struggling with the same thing.
Yeah. And I think this is a piece where it's sometimes very hard to do this work because the work that I do is in tandem with the life that I'm living. And there's so much overlap that it's like, can I be talking about this? Like, I'm literally having this same conversation last night.
The imposter syndrome, right?
And it's, you know, as therapists, we are not fully healed from the things that we are working on. We're just trained in it, and we have the expertise of helping others and being an outside observer, which, I mean, is the hugest difference when it's not your own stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the communication issues that I help my couples work through are the same ones that my husband and I work through. They are like, I think it is a common struggle and difficult point for a lot of couples, especially with young kids. And I try to illustrate that to my couples a lot. Like, I have this conversation that we're having like all day with all the couples, right? Like, not to minimize, but really just normalize. Like, what you're going through is not unheard of. I don't want to say it's not special, but sometimes it's just not special.
But and like, thank God it's not.
Because if you feel so alone.
Right.
And you're like, what is wrong with us? Like, why can't we figure this out? Why do we keep having this conversation about the dishwasher, the laundry, the diapers, whatever it is? You know, why do we keep falling in this same like routine of conversation? And why am I then equating that with, why am I in this marriage? Why don't you love me? Right? Like, why does the dishwasher then become a huge thing about the fundamentals of our relationship?
Yeah, so for people who are not me, but our listeners, of course, why do we have all those same fights? Talk to us more about that.
I think it's because people don't know how to have those big conversations, right? They don't know how to go in and talk about the fact that they feel like in marriage they're losing power and control, and they don't feel like there's balance, and they don't feel valued, or those things, those bigger ticket items, as I call them, those like real fundamentals get triggered in those conversations about the dishwasher or the diapers. And they get triggered in conversations about, you know, well, you took 2 nights off this week, and you went on a trip last month, and right, like, those are the times where those kind of gut things that are in each of one of us get flared up, and we only can understand them in the context of whatever the
superficial thing is. Okay.
And so it helps to have a pattern decoder, which is, I feel like, what I am a lot of the time, to be like, okay, let's strip this part of it off. Let's take off this layer. Let's really dive into and just name like what that feeling is, and just kind of really not pick it apart to be like nitpicky, but to really
dissect.
And to really understand like what is going on. What am I feeling? What am I trying to say?
So you said a few things that felt so key for me.
That's right. We already are.
I think a lot of people are going to resonate with the idea of power, control, and like, I don't remember the word that you used, but basically, like, how are we divvying things up? Balance, equity, like division of labor, all of those things are really kind of at the root of these things that feel silly. But they're not, because they represent something so much bigger.
And I think once you have kids, and myself, my partner, most of the couples that I work with are 2 household working parents, with kids, and then comes in a lot of like, where is my value? Like, do you see my value? I feel
value,
like I'm trying so hard to be valuable, especially as women, like, to all these people. I'm giving so much, and I have so much expectation from my partner to see that and recognize that. And if it's not being recognized in the way that I would like it to be, that can trigger a whole lot of behavior that can be like yucky.
Really not helpful.
Really not helpful, but it's really like do you see how I'm trying to be
Yes,
valuable? Like,
totally.
I'm trying so hard.
Oh my God. Have you seen that image? Or it might even be a piece of art where like it's two people standing like back to back, their arms crossed,
yeah.
and their inner child
Yes.
is like reaching out.
Yes.
That's what's so much like bad behavior in couples.
Yeah.
God, when I'm acting out in my marriage, like that's what's happening.
Right.
I feel sad, I feel scared, I feel angry, but like there's really a vulnerable piece under that like just wants to be seen or loved or heard. And
it's so much like reactivity.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much reactivity. Oh, I'm getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So much.
And so we try to just kind of break down the reactivity and understand like the starting point of it.
Yeah.
Like why, where is it coming from? Why is it coming up in that way? And like what can we do to try to communicate that point rather than react to it, and or just like try to react in a different way.
Right.
And even that, like if we cannot kick and scream, like can we cry? Like that, I think what a lot of what I do is just trying to like curse.
Fuck yeah.
A lot of what I do is just trying to like fuck shit up a little bit. Like,
love that.
So you tell me you cry and scream a lot. Like, let's try, you know, punching a pillow. Like, what would that do, right? Like, let's just try to
try something different.
Anything different, because most of my couples are just so in a rut and they're just so stuck.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, so I know a biggie for couples, especially couples who have children. And so the first thing that comes to mind is division of labor. It was one of the first examples you gave, right? About like the dishes and the laundry and the garbage, like whatever. Where does one even begin? If they're not in therapy, right? And you're just listening to this, where do you even begin? I know. I'm just thinking like if we could approach conversations with our partners with more intentionality. Like what?
I think it starts with, most of the time when I get to the point of meeting with people, there's become imbalance.
Right.
And then like we were talking about, there's so much reactivity. There's so much like not like we're almost past trying to rebalance. Now we're just like pissed and like acting a fool, right? So I think like bringing that back and like actually being able to have a conversation of like about the imbalance would be a huge starting point than where I think most couples jump in at.
Right. So even just the commitment to not act a fool, right?
Yes.
To like get yourself regulated. Yes. So I guess that's one of the number one questions for anybody who's like, we can't afford therapy, whatever, is like, can I get myself regulated?
Yes. Like, can I have this conversation about the imbalance?
Right.
Outside of a point of being triggered, dysregulated, upset, frustrated. Like when things are going well.
Right.
When I'm feeling like, oh, wow, they did pick up the clothes that were 2 feet from the hamper at all times.
But that's not personal at all.
Like around the corner. It's right there. Like when things are going well, can we try to broach that conversation of finding more balance?
Right. And can I do that from a place of kindness, curiosity, respect, collaboration? Yes. That's a beautiful word. Yeah.
Like
totally.
We're in this together. Let's identify where our own strengths lie, and work from there. And remember, it doesn't have to be 50-50. I think that's the point where a lot of people fall into a difficult conversation, right?
Okay.
Like, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It doesn't have to sound equal or fair to anyone else other than like the people that are executing it, like you and your partner. So I think that's the other piece, is challenging this idea that it needs to be equal and making it feel like equitable, like it's fair, it makes sense, it's something I can get on board with. Yeah,
that's such a good point. And I think, at least for me, and I think a lot of other people who do want equity in their marriage, this idea of 50-50 feels like a big deal. And I'm thinking about, feminism and all these things that like, which I'm a big proponent of,
Yeah.
but all these things we've been like conditioned to believe the way that it looks, and really deconstructing the shoulds
Yes.
and the conditioning. And it's like, what do I really want? What does my partner really want? What would feel good to us, even if it's not what we've been taught it should look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that 50-50 is real, number one.
Right.
Truth. I think you would spend way more time like tallying it up than actually just like splitting it.
Yeah.
How it feels fine, right?
Yeah.
So I think as we incorporate too like a lot of neurodivergence into the equation, like we're not splitting things 50-50
Right.
in my household, because it would talk about running a mess. Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I could run laps and it would be like nothing.
Right.
You know, like if I gave my partner the task of checking the school emails, not a single school email would be checked.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think it's splitting based on not just trying to find 50-50, but like what's an easy task for me to do?
Mm-hmm.
What is light for me to pick up? What is, you know, what's easier for my, you know, to give, to pass off? Like those kinds of questions I think are a good place to start, rather than 50-50 being the goal.
That makes so much sense. I'm really glad you talked about that. And I keep coming back to what you just said about neurodivergence.
Yes.
We both have neurospicy families.
Yes.
I think the intersection of gender here is particularly interesting when we talk about neurodivergence and gender, because you are neurotypical.
Mm-hmm.
Your partner is neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He is a man.
Mm-hmm.
You are partnered to a man. I am also partnered to a man who is neurodivergent, but I am also neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
And the ways that I think
divergent in the same direction.
Sometimes both. It gets real complicated. But I think because I'm a woman, and I've been conditioned and programmed that I'm supposed to be the primary parent, and I'm supposed to do all of these things, and I've just needed to function in ways that aren't necessarily expected of men or haven't been historically. Yeah. Even though I'm every bit, if not more neurodivergent than my husband, I still overfunction because I'm the woman in the relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty wild to think about. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
And I would say like probably the majority of that is your doing.
You bet.
And it's like in my case, it's my own doing.
Yes.
We get the messages early on, like you do all the things.
That's right.
Like your husband goes to work and like you do all the things. Oh, and you get to go to work too.
Right. Congratulations. Yay. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot for most people. And, you know, then you add kids in the mess, and it's a whole lot.
It's a whole lot. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about co-parenting, because I know that's a biggie. Yeah. And we're going through this a lot in my home.
Yep.
Ties in with the neurodivergence, right? Where we have really different styles of parenting. My husband is a lovely father. He's an amazing man. We have very different styles of parenting. Mm-hmm. He also doesn't know as much about neurodivergence because, again, I'm the mom. I've done all the research. I've been down all the rabbit holes, right? And so I don't think we would almost ever fight if we did not have children, and we're not constantly like, I think we should do it this way. No, I think we should do it. Like, how can we help families manage the co-parenting situation, especially even when there's not extra variables like neurodivergence, but especially when there is?
Yeah. I think it's really hard.
It's really hard.
And I like to start with like the lower hanging, much less important conversations.
Okay.
Right? So like this doesn't necessarily apply to big important things, like big important decisions with kids.
Right.
But for the everyday mundane, right? Because a lot of the couples that I see, they can't get through the everyday bullshit.
Right.
And so once it comes to the bigger conversations, they're like, we can't have a conversation about whether we get ice cream at the grocery store or not.
Right. Putting the fucking toilet paper roll on the thing.
Let alone like education, you know, bigger, more important things. So I think if we can set up rules about how we navigate smaller ticket items, smaller ticket conversations, like if a kid comes to me about going to a friend's house, right? Like what are our rules about sleepovers? What are our rules about a curfew, like at this stage? And so I think the conversation then becomes making rules based on your family and what you both can operate on, because then at least you can operate with confidence and trust from that conversation.
Right.
And then work off of that.
Yeah. So coming up with like, here's what we do agree on.
Yeah.
Here are the basics, and then building from that like foundation or infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oh God.
It's so hard though.
It is so hard. It is so hard. And I think there's one of the reasons I like doing this is because I think that there's this misconception, especially with our clients, that like, since you're a couples therapist, you and your husband like never fight, and like you never get triggered, and like you never behave in.
No.
I mean, I know better.
I perfectly. Just ask my husband.
Yeah. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that's like? Because I think it's tricky to be a human who's a therapist, because we know all the things we're supposed to do, and then we don't do them, at least some of the time, right?
Yeah, or like I do them. My partner doesn't do then that, right? Like,
okay.
Like I said the thing, now you're supposed to say
do it. Yeah,
your thing.
Here's your script.
Yes.
Please cooperate.
I love a good script. But yeah, I mean, things never go as planned, and I'm 100% joking. Like I don't always say it right, and I don't always, very rarely, like do it by the script.
Right.
It's incredibly difficult. Like it sometimes makes me question continuing to see clients.
Really?
Because I love seeing clients,
of course,
but sometimes I'm like, it's so close to home.
Yeah.
Right. And like I have 2 very young kids, and so in the throes of it, and sometimes I'm like, damn, I need to just like pump the brakes and like shift in. And I think that's the other piece too of like having so many things that I'm working on, and I know you are too. Like I can shift from clients, and I can explore other avenues and other things I'm excited about. Yeah. Because it's hard. It's hard seeing yourself in the conversation with clients so much.
Totally.
And not being able, and I do this sometimes with my clients now. I'm like, I had this conversation with my husband last night, right?
Totally.
Like the normalizing of it.
Absolutely.
And not to the point of like making it about me and my husband, but of being like, these are real conversations that a lot of couples are having. Yeah. I am sitting in this position because you've hired me to.
That's right.
But it's not because I'm perfect.
That's right.
It's because I have like an expensive degree and experience doing it.
I love the humanizing of this stuff, because I think it's really easy to feel like, oh, well, they've got it all together, and I'm a trauma therapist. So I think there's a misconception like, oh, I'm just like so regulated all the time. And the fact is like, I'm very rarely regulated, and I have to work exceptionally hard for my moments of regulation. And humaning is hard.
It is.
Humaning is hard. And then when you add another person into that equation, like, woo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then adding on like kids and, working from home and living in the same community that you work in and all those other factors.
Yeah.
But I think that's really like a conversation about stigma.
Ooh, say more about that.
I think it is that idea that people do have this expectation that therapists don't have therapists.
Right.
And I often tell my clients that, oh yeah, my couples therapist or your grand therapist.
I like that, your grand therapist. That's perfect.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah. Right. So I think that's like, and then it sticks. They're like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. But I think there is somehow that narrative is getting stuck that that we have it all together.
Totally.
That we have been like ordained with this unique knowledge.
No. I fucking wish though sometimes. That would be like amazing. But no. Somebody once gave me an analogy, and I love it so much, of like, two people climbing a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that should and can be the therapist client relationship, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, I simply have perspective
Mm-hmm.
of where you are because
Yeah.
I'm over here climbing my own fucking mountain.
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly. Yes.
And so it's just so much when I'm climbing my own mountain, there's just less I can see. But really, like, if you were over there, you'd be able to see a lot more about my situation too.
And I think that is the piece, right? It's like when I am going more towards like my coaching lens, I'm feeling like, okay, these are the skills and the tools. Like anyone can use them. I can use them. You can use them. Your neighbor could be using them. You don't know. But the therapy lens, I think, is where we're really unpacking.
Yeah.
And when I'm fully in my therapist lens, I'm feeling less embodied in myself.
For sure. Oh, big time. Yeah.
Than I am when I'm coaching and like more advice giving, strategy giving. And that's, I think, where I'm like feeling more inauthentic because I'm like, I could really use this advice myself.
Totally. The imposter syndrome can be so real.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, I know the answer to this, but don't tell my yesterday self that. But I think that's the difference of therapy too. It's like when I feel like I'm doing real therapy, like we're dissecting much more, and it is much less about me and my stuff.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I know you've got some kind of program, don't you? Like a couples program?
Yeah.
Yeah. So same. I'm obsessed with this because obviously the Healing Haven is all about accessibility and increasing accessibility. And not everyone and not every family can commit to 60 minutes every single week, like with no end in sight. Like that's just not attainable for everybody. So tell us about your couples program.
So I have a few. The one that I think would be a great fit for the Haven is like a 6-week program for couples, and it's 6 weeks. It's like, not a large time commitment, but it is more independent work throughout each of the 6 weeks. It has, curriculum for the week, things that they're learning. It builds on that from the 6 weeks. It's based in Gottman's theories for helping relationships. Yes, evidence.
Big name.
Yeah, and it's great. I think it's a perfect fit for that people can't access therapy services. And it has like the exercises and the conversations and the scripts. And so I think that's a great option.
Yeah.
And then I'm also kicking off my intensives, which is
same more.
So the intensives, I mean, it's still a bit of a rough draft in terms of like when and where and how, but it's really just a boot camp for couples to show up and just like get in for a full day or two and like learn the shit that they need to learn and do it and be fully like both feet in for
dive into
hours.
the deep end.
Yeah. It's very tools based, skills based, scripts, exercises. We're not going to be doing as much of like the lofty therapy. It's much more of like
the down skills, and dirty, brass tacks. Here we go.
Yeah, the skills and tools. So totally. I mean, that's what I hear a lot of. I think there's a lot of great couples therapists, but I think what I hear a lot of too is that couples are missing out on the skills, and that's really what's lacking. And couples therapists too are missing out on the skills. Like So
I like it.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love that because it just gives people more options to get the things they need without a lot of the fluff. And sometimes people need the fluff and in a long-standing relationship. Like there's always going to be a place for traditional talk therapy. But I really think the pandemic and the rise of everything being virtual has just opened up a lot more possibility for people accessing therapeutic care in ways that are non-traditional and therefore more accessible, which I love.
Yeah. And I mean, there's this huge divide in a lot of spaces around like counseling or coaching, and there's a definite need and place for both, and they are not interchangeable. And as someone who does both, and I feel like you do both as well, like they're different hats, and different people are needing that different intervention at different points. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of coaches out there that are like doing their thing, and no shade to them, but I think there's something unique about having a blend of both.
Yeah, absolutely. The therapist training and expertise
Yes.
combined with really directive feedback,
Yeah.
and skill building and stuff that is research backed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about when you're in the throes of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you really are not regulated, you are
Mm-hmm.
acting a fool.
Okay.
Do we pull out? Is it like a tantrum? Do we have to just let it ride? Do you have strategies that you come up with your clients? Like, do they say bananas? Like, is there
code word?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there, like, I'm thinking about harm reduction, right? Like, you can't get into therapy yet. You can't get all the skills. How do we reduce the amount of harm that we're causing ourselves and our partners?
I think part of it is being able to have a conversation with your partner about what you're doing that's causing harm.
That
Because
sounds
I
like
think
a good
that's a
place
great
to start.
place to start.
Yeah, for sure.
Because what you think is causing harm maybe isn't.
Right.
And maybe what you think is like, not a big deal is actually causing them a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start there and then work off of that. Like if they're saying, when you come into the room, when you come upstairs, when we're having a conflict, I go upstairs and you follow me,
Mm-hmm.
that's causing harm.
Right.
That's great feedback. And then you can say, okay, what can I do instead?
Totally.
Right? Okay, I won't follow you upstairs, but you need to come back downstairs in an hour,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just be like, I'm still here, I'm still processing, let's pick it up later. Which I think is addressing that pursuer distancer dynamic that we see very often.
Totally.
So I would start there is really just having the conversation with your partner and saying, I feel like we find ourselves in this situation. What is causing harm? What do you need me to be doing differently? And this is what I need you to be doing differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I love that. And it does feel, and we know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's often hard to put this in practice, that so much of this is actually preventative work.
Yeah.
And in creating kind of a stable base, a secure home base with each other. Do you have tips or tools or things you do in your own marriage? Like, how do you start to build back that foundation, especially if there's a bunch of cracks in it?
Yeah. I mean, couples therapy helps a lot. I think on my own terms, it is hearing my partner, like I said, like hearing what I'm doing that's causing harm, and recognizing, like, as uncomfortable as it is, like going back to those big fights or big tantrums and trying to say, like, what was going on for me in that moment that informed that behavior. And so something that I've started doing is like just riding that wave of emotion and letting it pass, or finding a way to express it that's not to my partner and not harmful. So whether it's journaling or just like writing it in my notes app,
right?
Like writing that really horrible, mean text that I want to, and just like leaving it in the notes app until the next day, and then looking at it, or just letting my mind go through the rant that I would like to say,
Totally.
and then just going to sleep, and then just seeing how I feel tomorrow. Because if it's important enough, it'll be there tomorrow.
For sure. So that pause, right? We're addressing the reactivity, which is where all the harm happens.
Yes.
The shit that you feel terrible about the next day.
Yes.
Or you fucking double down, and that is a bad thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. So I think when people are partnered and have children, just even finding time to connect about neutral things is hard. And that starts to even chip up, like more like passively chip away at the foundation. You know what I mean? So one of the things that Nick and I have started doing is like, everything's so busy, especially with the ages of our kids, right? Like, we've got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they've got a million after school things. So it's like we get home we have dinner, we do a quick like best part of the day, worst part of the day, what are you most grateful for? And then everybody's like off. Everybody's like showering, Nick's doing the dishes, thank God. I might be helping like herd the cats and make sure they're doing whatever. So by the time the children actually go to bed, which these days is later, it's like 8:30, it's 9, whatever. I need to be in bed by 10:30. Like we have such a narrow window. It's easy to just like fall on the couch and like Netflix it up.
Yep.
What do you?
I was literally having this. Were you listening to my session today?
So okay, so what do you think about?
This is why I can never stop seeing clients because I'm just lose touch. Okay, so what I told my clients today is that they had connection on a pedestal.
Oh, okay.
And I gotta put my glass down. Like for them to connect, all the things had to fall into place, right? Like the kids had to go to bed easy. The moon had to be, my Mercury had to be retrograding. My plans had to be canceled. Netflix had to drop this new show that both of us would actually like. I had to have finished my book and had already gotten to the bottom of my feed, right? Like all of these things have to work for connection.
Right, the stars have
and
to
therefore
align.
It never happens. And instead of that, we need to be microdosing connection throughout the day.
Oh, you just said a really beautiful word, microdosing. Talk to me about I love microdosing. Lots of things. That's another podcast.
Probably not with me, but for microdosing connection.
We'll get an in on that.
I'll sit on the other side of the block.
Talk to me about microdosing connection.
So it's about the smaller moments rather than like the bigger moment.
Okay.
And that's what it is. It's like people are always like, oh, we need connection to be like it is on vacation or like it used to be, and we don't have the time. And that, I think it's more like connection needs to be equated with like how we interact with gratitude. Like gratitude needs to be in every moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, the advice that I gave my client and I would take for myself, and I'll tell you, is like the difference between the busyness of like, oh, they have to be here and then I have to be here, and the life that we've set up that we love and is like a dream come true. This is our dream life. Is the gratitude, is the intention, it's the microdosed connection. That's really the only difference.
Oh, that's so nice.
Mother is crying.
That's so sweet, but it's so fucking true.
Yeah, that is the only difference. Because like if kids are running around and they're at activities and you know they're jumping in like that can be so beautiful. And it is the difference of being intentional and being connected in that moment. And you know that difference of like when the kid is literally melting down and you just look at each other and we're like,
this is a shit show.
My husband says to me all the time, isn't he everything you hoped and dreamed he would be?
That's a nice one.
Like, isn't this what you hoped and dreamed for? I'm like, and more. And more and more and more. So that's really the difference is, are you able to take that and make it the moment of connection, or is, you know, are we just finding every excuse to not connect?
Which is what I think a lot of people do, right? Which isn't, they're not bad. None of us are bad for doing that. But the beauty of what you just said that I can connect to so much is about consciousness.
Yes.
And how awake are we?
Yeah.
And it's like so many of us who are partnered with children have wanted this, dreamed about this forever. And we're, oh my God, that's going to make me emotional. And like, we might be fucking missing it.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We are so often. And I think it's similar to gratitude because it's like, we don't feel gratitude just throughout our day.
Right.
That's why we intentionally do gratitude practices.
Right.
Like, I want to feel gratitude throughout the day. And therefore, I hone my brain to look for those moments. And I set a timer to have a moment of gratitude.
To wake me up.
Right. Or to meditate or whatever it is that's in your gratitude practice. And I think connection with ourselves, our partner, the
Mhm.
world. It's all on that same spectrum.
Yeah. Holy shit, that got so deep and so heavy. Tina. Wow. That's so good. That's so good because that takes you to a different playing field entirely.
Yes.
Instead of it like we're just stuck here in this. How do we change the rules? How do we play differently? It's like don't play there.
Don't
like,
play there. You're
Yeah.
not going to connect over Netflix.
Yeah.
Sorry to
No.
bring it to you.
Right. So like what do you have and how can you like go deeper into those moments
Yeah.
like together?
Yeah. And I think that's why we feel connection on date nights or vacation
Right.
or, you know, any time that those things are fully aligned because we expect it to show up there.
Right.
Like we expect to feel gratitude on Thanksgiving. We expect to feel
Right.
gratitude on our kids' birthdays.
Right.
On holidays and like momentous occasions.
Right.
What we don't, and so we're expecting it and we have it in our line of vision. And when we do a gratitude practice, it's trying to bring that into the line of vision that becomes very narrow focused more often, more consistently.
That to me feels like if you take away anything from this podcast in terms of improving your relationship, because here's the thing that I love so much about that doesn't require anything of the other person. This is the next thing I want to get into. Yeah. We so often do this.
Oh,
right. And it's like so, and unfortunately, I think, I'm sure you don't do this, but I think a lot of therapists, especially who are working with individuals, not couples, they reinforce that one partner's narrative, right?
Sure.
So like the woman comes in, she's married to a man, she's complaining about all the heteronormative things that her man is or isn't doing. And the therapist is like, yes, you're right.
That's
and
why I don't have any. Just realized that's why I don't have any individual clients.
I mean,
because I don't do that. I'm like, well, what do you think they're saying? Well, what do you think that person at the grocery store thought? Why
that's right.
About you?
That's right. That is such a problem, I think, with therapy these days. Maybe it's always been that way, but I feel like we are there and we wind up reinforcing. Yes. We're not a mirror. We actually stand next to the client and we're like, oh, I see what you see. Yeah, I see that. As opposed to seeing what they don't see.
Right. And you're asking like, right, what are you maybe missing? Did you ask?
Yes. Oh my God. So that's what I love so much is that it doesn't require your partner to do anything.
Yes.
It's like your job as an individual is to look for the good stuff and like actually take that in.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not, I think a lot of people also get stuck, especially when they come see me, they're at the near end of their rope.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to be just giving goodwill. They're like, well, I'm not going to give more than 2 clicks if you're not going to give more than 2 clicks, right? Like once you give 2 clicks, I'll respond to 2 clicks. And it becomes very like
tit
that.
For tat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is.
Right.
And it's a pretend, right? Like it's pretend. We get it. But we have to move out of that space.
For sure. If you want the marriage to last.
Or relationship in general.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of what I work on is like, you can use this with your partner. You can use this with your sister.
That's so true.
Your boss.
That's
and
so
I think
true.
that's the thing is like when we bring connection and gratitude and love and like the fact that we are a very small piece of the universe, like whatever it is that you're trying to hone in on, when you bring that more to the center of your dashboard, your like view,
right?
It's not for your partner,
right?
Right? Like it is for your own
well-being.
It is for your own like gratitude of life and like wellness, right? And everyone will benefit from that. And when we start to put more of that, more authentic connection into ourselves, our kids feel that, our kids' teachers feel that, right? Because the ripple effect happens.
You bet.
Like
because the whole energy of the home changes.
Yes, because our energy is changing.
Big time. I think that's something that people really, really, really need to hear, right? So like you want to do one thing to better your marriage, like look for the good moments and be grateful.
Yes.
But also associated with that is like, what can I do to be different instead of, and it's a both and, of
Yeah.
course, and we're never tolerating abuse or toxic shit, like, of course. But assuming there's not toxic abuse, assuming there's not abusive shit, there's always toxic shit in relationships. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Assuming we're not experiencing abuse, half of the goal, maybe more, is to be like, what can I do differently? How can I show up differently?
Yes.
Right?
Which is so challenging.
It really
is.
is.
We want to be like, well, when
It's
they
fair.
do this, I'll do this.
Yes.
When they show up
Right.
differently, then I'll be able to show up differently. And I think that is the stickiest part.
It is.
Is like, and that's where I start yelling at my clients. And I'll be like, listen, both of you got shit to show up and
That's
do.
right.
And it is.
Worry about your own shit.
Yes. And it's a three-legged race. No one wins a three-legged race alone. I mean, the people, there's always that one person that's trying to win alone and they're dragging the other one.
Someone.
They don't win.
No. And usually somebody gets very injured. Yes. Oh
but
my
it all
God.
flows to the same place, right? And if you expand that outside of your home, outside of your marriage, outside of your family, outside of your home, outside, like to the greater universe, like the more good that you're putting into yourself and your relationship, like that magnifies.
Yes.
Rather than I'll wait to change till you change, or you take the first step and then I'll step. It's like,
and I say, you know this, but like, I want to be clear for anyone watching, like, this is so hard to do. And I was stuck in my own marriage being like, yeah, just like,
it was me on Monday in couples therapy.
right, like, you need to do this differently, and like, you're failing me in this regard and whatever. And it wasn't until I like took back my power, which sounds sexy, but it also is doing all that hard work of like, I'm enabling this, I'm colluding in that. Like, what do I need to do differently for me to feel better for me? And then the relationship tends to take care of itself when we feel radically responsible for meeting our own needs.
Yeah. I think unfortunately what happens in relationships is one person tends to be functioning more.
Yeah.
And they, and so we are like, if I stop, like, I'm not seeing the results, right? Like, I have an expectation. If I function this much, I should see this result. And when we don't see that, then we're like, well, why am I here?
Yeah.
Like, I can go overfunction somewhere else. I can go overfunction for myself. I could, be this bad by myself. And so I think then it becomes the crux of the relationship of like, at what point am I over giving and allowing my partner to undergive? And that is where therapy is the spot.
You bet. Because that is really, if you're doing it in a way that has a lot of integrity and respect for your partnership, that's fucking hard and takes like a lot of work and time.
But I think going back to your question of like, how can people get support outside of the cost and time requirement of therapy, is like, there's a lot of work you can do up into that point.
Yeah.
Up to the point where, okay, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, like, I have worked on myself, like, and these are the things that didn't change or did change. And now we need help. I think I would love to see more couples come in at that point rather than we're at the end of the rope, we've fucking given up. Like, I think couples who come in, truly, if they come in and they say, we've tried this, we need help with this, I'm like, great, 2 sessions, let's go. Like, we can do it. So I think that's also the part of the stigma is like, most people can't do couples therapy in 2 sessions because they wait
till the very, very
end.
In
the shit show.
Yeah.
And we're having to like, I'm putting people on mute. I'm like, you got to stop talking. Right.
It's like a presidential debate.
No one's winning. So, yeah.
Why do people wait so long? That's a complicated question.
Couples therapy still has so much stigma. Like, as much as mental health and counseling and therapy has come a long way.
Right.
Couples therapy is still viewed as like the nail is getting pulled out of the box. It's about to be in the coffin, right?
Right.
It's like that is still the first step for most people in thinking their relationship will work.
Which is a chicken or the egg thing, right? And it's
Absolutely.
like that's only the stigma because historically people wait so long.
And it keeps them from going, right? So
That's
they're
right.
just falling right into the.
You bet.
Yep.
And so too much damage has been done. So that is an outcome. But
Yes.
if people started sooner, so when do people start?
Yesterday.
I mean,
Okay, but the other piece, I mean, yeah, start when you need to, right? Like, I think don't wait. I think if we're expecting that people are, well, let's zoom out. Most people don't have great relationship foundations to operate off of.
I mean,
We don't get it. It's bad.
Right.
So, I mean, even just like basic communication skills are just, we're at a very low bar. And so I think starting with the understanding that in that regard, the mental health world is still catching up. We know a lot more about depression and anxiety and even PTSD, OCD, like all of that. I think TikTok is way more on that than like actual couples communication issues. Things that aren't just like, is this toxic? Is this like, you know? Yeah. Gaslighting.
Your partner is a narcissist.
So I think just getting a baseline, getting some like education from real places other than TikTok is a good place to start.
Like Healing Haven.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of information out there. Using discernment, I think is a good place to start. Right.
So again, it's almost going back to preventative stuff, right? Like if we're waiting until there's a problem, that's probably not the most ideal. Like if we can anticipate we're getting married, we're about to have a kid, somebody's parent is sick. Like if there is something on the horizon that we know is going to be stressful, even if it's good, it's probably a good time to think about getting into couples therapy so that we can get like ahead of it a little, right?
I haven't heard a single couple say having a kid helped their dynamics.
I mean,
so let's just, start buying people couples therapy for their
oh my
shower.
God, wouldn't that be amazing?
That's what really needs to happen.
100.
Because that is just, I mean, a magnifying glass for whatever is going on.
Totally. And I mean, like a telescope in some ways, like shit you never even saw. It's suddenly right there in front of you. So good times. We are coming up on time. And we have dinner and drinks to go and get. So if people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Yes, well, you can find my practice at empowerfamilytherapy.com. If you're in need of a therapist for your family, for your relationship, for yourself, we cover all the relationships within the family system. All of our therapists are relationally trained. So even if you're going in individually, you can meet with a couples therapist to help you kind of challenge those individual pieces. And if you want to find more about me, you can go to tinapower.com and find out about my workshops and intensives and coaching.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
It was so fun. And thank you for being here. We hope you enjoyed this first in-person one, Therapist After Dark.